people, cultures, and spirituality of India. Her contributions are memorialized both here in Ireland and in India as a symbol of intercultural unity and shared values. Swami Sarvapriyananda is a noted interpreter of Vedanta. Currently, he leads the Ramakrishna Vedanta Center in New York. Born in Calcutta and raised in Bhubaneswar, he joined the Ramakrishna Order in 1994 and received his monastic vows in 2004. He has served in various capacities, including as an Acharya at the Monastic Probationers Training Center in Bellarmine, and later as the Vedanta Society of Southern California. In 2019 and 2020, he was the inaugural fellow at the Harvard Divinity School. We look forward to his insights on how the vision of Vivekananda and Sister Nivedita continues to speak powerfully to us today. And I will take this opportunity also to ask you to make sure your mobile phones are turned off. So with that, I would...
Can you go and check the live on Air Vedanta Society and see if the audio is okay? Text me. I'll send you the link, just check if the audio is okay and text me. Okay, so can you listen 2 minutes it takes to
Salutations to Vivekananda. Archbishop Jackson, Father Yesu is here, yes. Reverend Steve, Revered Swami Purnanandaji, respected Swami Shantivatanandaji, Dean Carson, Professor Nathan Hill, Professor Siddharth Sen, and many others. These are some of the ones who worked very hard. I know I was in correspondence with some of them before this event happened. So I'm very grateful to all of you and dear friends, whoever has come here, this esteemed audience, for making this happen and for giving me the high honor of speaking here at Trinity. On this first lecture in a series of lectures on the Margaret Noble series of lectures, I must congratulate Trinity and the Ramakrishna Vedanta Center of Ireland for taking this, can I permit myself a fun, noble initiative? Sister Nivedita, Margaret Noble, is a name, is a magical name in India. Not so well known in Ireland, but I think it should be more well known in India and also in Ireland. And this series of lectures will go some way in making that happen, you know. She was, I mean, but also a nationalist who ignited, helped the freedom struggle in India against British colonialism. She was a pioneer for women's education in India. To talk a little more about that a little later. She encouraged science and art and literature in India. And so she has become a very beloved figure there. But I feel more can be done. Now let me share with you 2 anecdotes, neither of which are very happy, but this goes to show that she hasn't gotten the stature that she deserves. One is connected to Ireland and one to India. I was a young monk about 20 odd years ago in our main monastery on the bank of the river Ganga in Belur near Calcutta. And once a delegation, I forget what kind of delegation it was, from Ireland was visiting, and I was asked to show it around. And when I heard they're from Ireland, I naturally enthusiastically started speaking about Sister Nivedita, until one of them, half humorously, I think, leaned and whispered conspiratorially in my ears, and he said, but she wasn't the right kind of Irish. So that, I mean, he was joking, but only half joking. That's one side of it. And the other side of it, in India, I was once invited to inaugurate an exhibition on education. This was in Calcutta. It's a well-known college for training women teachers. This is called Hastings House. Those of Vivekananda know. So Hastings House, College of Teacher Education. It's a women's college. And the exhibition was about school education, and the girls who were going to be school teachers. They had put up a series of, one of the exhibitions was about important key women educators in India, who were significant in the history of women's education in India. And there was nothing about Sister Nivedita, nothing about Margaret over there, which is so shocking and surprising. And I still remember sort of scolding the teacher trainees there, the professors there. It's not their fault. You know, she was excluded from the syllabus where you teach the history of education, modern education in India. She was excluded, and the reason I think why she was excluded is something to do with the early history of independent India, where you had a government, a political mentality which was very secular and determined to have nothing to do with religion. And Sister Nivedita's close connection with Hinduism, with Swami Vivekananda, I think it counted against her. So, I don't know what was the reason, that's what I'm thinking. Probably that's true. But, on the brighter side, things have changed. The same Hastings House. By the way, I think it's quite arrogant. We have no problems calling it Hastings House, named after Warren Hastings. But they hesitated to put up an exhibition about Sister Nivedita. But in the same Hastings House now, about a few years ago, I think 10 years ago or so, a huge new college for women's education has come up, and it's called Sister Nivedita College for Girls. So, and that's not just one incident. I mean, there are many such examples, and examples could be multiplied. So it is changing. The scenario is changing now. As I said, huge range of activities. Today's subject is much narrower. It is to do with Sister Nivedita as a philosopher of religion, her reading of Swami Vivekananda, and her re-understanding and reimagining spirituality for our times. But I cannot but mention a few things biographically. And if you're going to talk about her life and what she did in India, that could be more than one lecture. She accomplished a tremendous amount. I mean, from the late 1890s when she was there, she passed in 1911. She was aged, I think, 43. And she literally died of overwork in India. But a few anecdotes will suffice, I think. She collaborated with Renaissance figures in late 19th century and early 20th century India. Aurobindo Ghosh, the very well-known Sri Aurobindo, when he was a revolutionary fighting for India's independence against the British. Many people do not know the close contact that he had with Sister Nivedita. He had read her books, was very impressed, got in touch with her. She encouraged him. She writes in one of the letters, Aurobindo, at that time Aurobindo was not well known. Aurobindo is magnificent. You should read his writings in Karma Yoga. His magazine, which had political themes about Indian independence, but also articles about spirituality. And she edited it. Long after he became a refugee from British police. So at that time it was very interesting. There was a French colony near Calcutta, Changamnagar. And so those were politically, the British police were after them. because they are freedom fighters, they would just have to cross the border into Chandanagar, and because it was French territory, the police couldn't go and arrest them. Very interestingly, Swami Vivekananda's guru, Sri Ramakrishna, used this metaphor. He said, what does an incarnation of God do? He says, the incarnation of God is, Bengali he used is Parashkala, French land. And just that much to make, explain a lot. So what happens in French land? The British police cannot go and catch you there. And what he meant was, the incarnation has the power of wiping out your past karma. Your past karma cannot go and catch you if you take refuge in God, in the incarnation of God. When he was in this Parashkala, Sri Aurobindo, his magazine was kept alive by Sister Nivedita, who wrote the editorials. The famous scientist, J.C. Bose, Jagadish Chandra Bose, one of India's pioneers in various areas of science, biology definitely, plant biology, but also in radiation. He was inspired, supported, and just not a few words of support. When Nivedita supported you, she would take charge, basically. She was a very formidable figure. The great Indian poet, Rabindranath Tagore, admits to being rather overwhelmed by the force of the personality of Sister Nivedita. Jagadish Bose was guided, funded, inspired. His work was promoted by Sister Nivedita. I just heard that they had come here to Trinity, to Dublin in 1908, and they stayed nearby where Jagadish Bose presented a paper here. She would help him to write all his papers too, and his books. She writes about how she would go to the laboratory at 9 o'clock, work with Jagadish Bose till 5 p.m., day after day. Her own literary output, prodigious though it was, suffered because she helped so many people. Back to Dinesh Chandra, the famous Bengali historian. He had written a Bengali history of literature, and she wanted it to be translated into English. And she worked with him to translate those books into English. Now, Dinesh, in Bengali we say Dinesh Babu. So Dinesh Babu, he writes his self-deprecating humor. He says, one afternoon, I was walking down with Sister Nivedita in the narrow by-lanes of North Calcutta. And as it happens often, even now, the infamous Indian bull comes charging down those lanes, and everybody takes refuge. And Dinesh says, like any Bengali with a strong instinct of self-preservation triumphing over any chivalry, I jumped into the nearest shop, forgetting all about Sister Nivedita standing out helplessly on the street. I jumped into the nearest shop, and out of sheer sense of self-preservation. And when the danger had passed, I peeped out cautiously. And there was Sister Nivedita standing, glaring at me and saying, well, Dinesh Babu, is this the courage with which we are to overcome the British Empire? Which kick-started science research in India is the Bose Institute. There's something called the Unified Campus in the outskirts of Kolkata. It's a magnificent, huge new building. And the present director told me historical stuff about Sister Nivedita and Jagadish Bose. The Bose Institute, it was built on seed money collected painstakingly by Sister Nivedita. It seems that the story goes, this is from the present director of the Bose Institute, he told me that when Jagadish Bose, who expected, he had a chance at the Nobel Prize, I think Marconi got it, and he was very broken down about it. Sister Nivedita, she used to call him in Bengali Koka, which means little boy. The word she actually used, I found out later in her writings, is the Irish word B-A-I-R-N, bear. Yes. So the bear. She means the baby, who was the leading scientist of India at that time. So the baby is in tears because he couldn't get the Nobel Prize. Now what do we do? And she goes and promises him that, don't worry, whatever is the amount of the Nobel Prize, I will get that money and give it to you for your research work. And she was not rich. She collected that money, gave it to Jagadish Bose, and the Bose Institute was founded in Calcutta, which became the leading institute for scientific research. There's so many areas which we even now we're just beginning to discover. Sister Nivedita's contributions to science, for example. We know now that Swami Vivekananda, on the way to the United States in 1893, on the ship, which was taking him to Vancouver, from where he would go to Chicago for that landmark lecture at the World Parliament of Religions, he met this Parsi businessman, none other than Jamshedji Tata. And they talked about, of all things, a Parsi businessman, Parsi by the way is Zoroastrian, and a Bengali a Hindu monk, at that time completely unknown. And what did they talk about? They talked about science education in India, the future of science education in India. Years later, Jamshedji Tata would write to Vivekananda, who by that time had become very well known. Do you remember, we met on the boat to America, and you have told me about a research institute in science for Indians. And I want to start that, and I want you to be the first director. Of course, that didn't happen. But the letter is available. In the Tata website, you'll find the letter is there. But the subsequent history is not well known. This much a lot of people know. Subsequent history is that Swami Vivekananda passed away the 4th of July 1992 at the age of 39. Jamshedji Tata passed away. He left money and a plan for it, but nothing in his lifetime. And the British government said the natives have no need of higher science education. It's not for them. Now, it was Sister Nivedita, this is an unknown history, Sister Nivedita who fought for it in India and to London, to the British Parliament, to get permission to start this Tata Institute for Research in Bangalore, which is now the Indian Institute of Science, even now the local people call it the Tata Institute. And that galaxy of scientists were produced by the Institute, who were instrumental in starting a range of other scientific institutes in India, engineering institutes, whose products are now powering the IT revolution across the world, especially if you go to Silicon Valley, other places in America, they are flooded with Indian IT people. You see the effect that Vivekananda had, which is mediated by Sister Nivedita. If I go on with anecdotes about what she did and what she accomplished and new things we are beginning to discover about her. But anyway, I think it gives you an impression. Just one more thing before I actually start. Swami Vivekananda wanted girls' education for women. And Sister Nivedita, one of the first things that she took up, she established a Nivedita school for girls. And at that time in India, girls were not educated. People were not willing to send their daughters to school. She literally went to this nearly had asked me to do just this one thing for girls. And I have failed. I failed in that too. And she weeps. And she leaves distraught. But you know what's so touching about it? Those who are from Calcutta, you know that the school for girls is well alive, even now. It continues to do well, it has a good name. Not only that, it was the seed of a revolution. It's the seed of revolution. Women's education is well and truly alive in India. And I often say to highly accomplished scholarly ladies in India that in one sense you are all daughters of Nivedita, of Sister Nivedita. It's her blessings that have come down to all of you and all of us through all these highly educated and accomplished Indian women. I remember, okay, one more anecdote. She passed away and then she is, her father was a minister, Wesleyan Methodist minister, and his church was in Devonshire, in England. And there were family crypt there. I visited that place a few years ago. The government of West Bengal, they had sponsored a statue of Nivedita to be put up there. And the people in the local village, they didn't know that a girl from that village had gone on to do such things in a far-off land. So they also gathered and installed the statue there. And the family crypt there, it's so beautifully written. You know, It says, "Here lie the ashes of Margaret Noble, Sister Nivedita, of Ramakrishna Vivekananda." And the scientist Jagadish Bose, who after Nivedita passed, bought her ashes there and put it in their family crypt there. She would always sign Nivedita of Ramakrishna Vivekananda. I think following Saint Teresa of Avila, who would always write Teresa of Jesus. I think that's where she got the inspiration from. But that's just a glimpse, a photograph of a quick snapshot of what Nivedita was. But today, our focus is on Nivedita, the thinker and the interpreter of our teacher, Swami Vivekananda. And out of her prodigious output, or writing, we would do well to just concentrate on a few pages she wrote, introducing the complete works of Swami Vivekananda. Just 3 or 4 pages, but it's a masterful essay, and so soaringly written, eloquently, passionately written. In 3 or 4 pages, she describes what Vivekananda was. And there we will focus on one paragraph, which talks about the philosophical essence of Vivekananda's teaching. She says there that whatever Vivekananda taught it's already there in the Upanishads, in the Gita. She says, in fact, quite touchingly, she says that he hardly said anything that was personal. When Vivekananda taught, he did not talk about his own realizations. When he went to the World Parliament of Religions in Chicago, he did not take that opportunity to speak about his own master, Sri Ramakrishna. Rather, he embodied the entire spiritual wisdom of India and spoke as a representative of Indian spirituality. And then she goes on to say that all of what Vivekananda said was already there, even had he not lived. She writes, had Vivekananda not lived, all of what he taught would still have been true, because it's the ageless wisdom of the Upanishads, of the Bhagavad Gita, and so on. Perhaps, she says, it would have suffered for want of access. Vivekananda said, the Vedanta, which is limited to a few scholars and monks, I shall broadcast it all over the world. The Vedanta, which is limited to forest caves and mountain caves, I shall scatter and broadcast across the cities of the world. So access to the spiritual wisdom, a democratization of the accumulated spiritual treasure of India. Vivekananda did that, definitely. He built a bridge between the East and the West, a bridge which continues to be in existence. Swamis and the yogis and the entire Eastern tradition have been flowing to the West. Vivekananda was a pioneer here. But then, Sister Nivedita asks, was there anything original? What was new in Vivekananda? Apart from the timeless wisdom which he transmitted to the West. But what was new or unique in Vivekananda? And she said there was. She says that he uses the words, his crowning achievement, the crowning achievement of Vivekananda was the simple doctrine, the great and simple doctrine that the many and the one are the same reality, seen by the same mind at different times and different attitudes, that bears repetition. She says the many and the one with the capital, the many and the one are the same reality, seen by the same mind at different times and different attitudes. Now, what does that mean? That has to be unpacked. She goes on to say that it is this central conviction through which can be read and understood almost everything that Vivekananda has spoken and written. And I don't know of any other monk or scholar who has studied Vivekananda penetrated to such depth and brought out the essence so luminously and so eloquently as Nivedita has done. What does she mean by that? She herself explains. She says, take for example, now we are delving into the depths of metaphysics and spiritual interpretation thousands of years in India. The age-old debate between non-dualism and dualism in India they call Advaita Vedanta, Vishishta Advaita, Dvaita Vedanta. All of these are schools of Vedanta, and most of us we know that they take for their basis, their root, the same text, the same Upanishads are interpreted by the Advaita school, the non-dualist school, by saying that there is one non-dual spiritual reality, and the whole world and us, we are all manifestations of this one spiritual reality. So non-duality. I remember when I first was sent to the West, somebody told me when you speak about duality and non-duality, you have to be careful, because duality and non-duality in the West, it means something different from what we understand here in India. For example, in the West, it might mean the duality of evil and good, whereas in Vedanta, in Hinduism, it's more ontological. There is how many realities are there? So if there is one divine reality and a secular worldly reality, then it's dualism too. But if there's really primarily one reality, it's non-dual. Or there is something in between, like there is one divine reality and we are all parts of it. So Advaita, Vishishta Advaita, Dvaita. And what had been going on for about 1,000 years before Vivekananda was great masters had come, Shankara, Ramanuja, Madhvacharya, many others also. And they all did what might be called a hermeneutical exercise, interpreting the Upanishads in the light of their own doctrine. So the same Upanishads gave rise to the teaching that you are that, Tattvamasi, that you are, the non-dual teachings, which are taken on in new life now, in America especially. There's all these neo-Advaita direct path teachers, Eckhart Tolle and many others. The same Upanishads gave rise to the teaching that God and us, we are all parts of a divine oneness. The oneness is called God, and we are all parts of it. Not that you are God, not identically, but a part you share in the divine oneness. And the same Upanishads gave rise to, quite cogently, a theory that God and the human and the world, they are separate realities. And the idea was what is called in Sanskrit Ekavakyata. The teachings that texts must have one meaning. So it could be either this or that or the other one. It couldn't be all of them were correct. And so 1,000 years of hermeneutical, philosophical wrangling and debate and dialectics, huge mass of literature were produced. It's good. It led to the flowering of Indian philosophy, really. But what Vivekananda, following Sri Ramakrishna taught, and Sister Nivedita makes this in all of these paths, not as the truth or the interpretation. All of these paths will bring you in contact with that reality. So they take you to that reality. And therefore, it's not that one is right and the other is wrong. In fact, the same spiritual seeker at one point might have a devotional relationship with God. As God be master, or God be the father, or God be mother, and with a relation with the devotee. Or could have a mystical union with God as a divine oneness. And not that one is right and the other is wrong, but depending on the attitude of the spiritual seeker, you might see that side of God. Sri Ramakrishna put it so beautifully. He said, it's like a mountain of sugar. A little ant goes to a mountain of sugar and is delighted to find this mountain of sugar and grabs one little grain and with great difficulty drags it back to its little home and looks back and says, I'll come back and take the whole mountain. It won't. It cannot. And it need not. Similarly, the limitlessness of the divine, we, like the little ant, we just need one part of it to fill our little tummies, spiritually to become exalted and free. So, it is quite possible that the divine is so capacious that it provides for a variety of interpretations. That was a remarkable new light thrown on an age-old debate in Indian philosophy. The various schools of Vedanta, that they could all be true, and all of these interpretations. Because if you go to the Upanishads, if you go to the Gita, honestly, clearly, it seems to be saying all things. And it's a lot of hard work to make it to one systematic, neat philosophy, but it's sort of procrastinating. You tend to cut out things which don't fit with your worldview. Whereas this approach, Nivedita's approach, would sign off on each of those Upanishadic statements and take them at their face value. She goes on to say, one and the many are the same reality. This was Vivekananda's teaching. If we pause here, see why is this important? What is this all about? Take a look at Indian philosophy. What's the worldview that we come across in Indian philosophy? Indian philosophy in a nutshell, let's say. If you go to the Nyaya, Vaisheshika worldview, a very ancient school of philosophy, they are committedly pluralistic. Yes, there is a God, but that God is one reality among many realities. There are substances, there are qualities, there are actions, there are relationships. So multiple kinds of realities are there, among which one reality would be a self, and one kind of self would be a divine self, which would be God. So a pluralistic worldview. The many are real. The one is real as long as it's part of the many. When you come to the Sankhyan worldview, it says there are two kinds of realities. From multiple realities come down to two realities. One is a spiritual reality, one is a material reality. The spiritual reality is pure consciousness, being, Purusha, and the material reality is Prakriti, the whole of nature with all its categories. So, from one and many to two. When you come to, say for example, the Vishishtadvaita theory, worldview, the one is real, but the many are parts of that one. As, for example, the body and its parts. So the body is there, but the body has hands and feet and head and tummy, and they are all different from each other. But they are also part, there's an integral oneness to them, because they are all part of one body. Similarly, here is this universe of multiplicity. There are human beings like us, there are animals, there are creatures, there are non-living entities, from mountains to sand, from quarks to quasars and so on. And they are all part of a divine unity, like parts of the body. So the one is real, one being Brahman, God, the Absolute, and the many are parts of it. Or you could go to the classical Advaitic, non-dualistic view of Adi Shankaracharya, where the one alone is the sovereign reality, and the many which we see are appearances of that one reality. Brahma Satyam, Jagat Mithya. Brahman alone is real, the world is a which were current reality, spiritual reality, which the many are part. Or there's one reality of the many with many are appearances of that one, and so on. Whereas, Nivedita says, Vivekananda's breakthrough was precisely this, that the one and the many are the same reality. Seen in one particular spiritual insight, it is one reality. And then seen as if from the outside, it is many. And it's the same reality. It's not that one is real and many are an illusion. It is exactly the same reality. What follows from this insight? Nivedita draws some extraordinary conclusions which I just mentioned. She says, henceforth, no division between the sacred and the secular. To labor is to pray. To have and hold is as stern a trust as to quit and renounce. She says, see, the point she makes is, this division that we make between the secular and the sacred, you make it in every society in the world, in every religion in the world. This is sacred, that's secular. But every society, every religion, and certainly India, we have realized that if you divide spirituality and secular life, spiritual life and secular life, it's an artificial division. After all, we have one life, one world, one reality. When we make a division, what happens is, on one hand, there is hardly any time, energy left over for spiritual pursuits. People are so busy and burdened by their lives. People say, where is the time for meditation, Swami? You sit for meditation, you fall asleep, I'm so tired. And where is the time for prayer? Where is the time for reading? You say there's a vast spiritual literature. Where is the time for reading all that stuff? I can't even read the top 10 and the Times literary list. Where will I find time for all of that? So, if we divorce spirituality from our secular life, spirituality is pushed to a corner. It is time, energy, vitality sucked out of it. We don't have time for all of that. And life, secular life, begins to suffer from meaninglessness, purposelessness, pointless. We are slogging so hard at work. And 20, 30 years down the line, when you're 40 years old, or after that, you begin to question. Life is running out. And to what point, to what purpose is most of my days are spent in this way without any meaning to it? Sri Ramakrishna put it this way. If you have a string of zeros, you put one zero after the other. No matter how many you add, it's still zero. And then it says if you put one before all of these zeros, then each of these zeros has value. One zero will make it 10, then two zeros will make it 100, and then three zeros 1,000, and so on. Now, Sri Ramakrishna does not explain any further, but it's quite obvious what he means. Putting God, whatever your word for it is, the divine, at the center of our life, that one. And then you add whatever there is money and career and our social life, family life, you keep on adding, those zeros will have value. They'll all shine in the radiance of that one. If you have nothing, you still have the one. So, divorcing spirituality from our secular life or secular life from spiritual life, both suffer. And here Sister Nivedita says, henceforth no division between the sacred and the secular. Here we must be careful. What she means is the exact opposite of what's been happening in the last 200 years. The secularization of life, and indeed even secularization of the sacred. Somebody pointed it out. Said, notice the way you teach yoga or even philosophy, spirituality, talking about the scientific quote-unquote benefits of that. That's a secularization of a spiritual person, trying to justify religion, spirituality, on the basis of material science. She's talking about exactly the opposite, but one must be very careful here. What she's talking about is not a religious society. Until very recently, most of our societies, including this country, Ireland, and India, and many other countries, are very religious countries. Religion, which one will you prefer? Which one will you prefer? The Greek worldview, or the Christian worldview, or the modernist worldview, or the postmodern worldview? He says, without hesitation, I will pick the religious, the Christian worldview. But, he says, the problem is we can no longer believe. We can no longer believe if you are sophisticated, especially if you're a sophisticated French philosopher. You can't believe, or you can't be seen to believe in religion. So here is the question. How can we convince the French philosopher to believe, to give that philosopher what he wants in his heart? A believable spirituality, a credible spirituality. There's no way you can go back to the medieval times, or not should we seek to go back there. What Nivedita is saying, and that's our interpretation of Vivekananda, that a spirituality for the future, without denying what the gains made in secularism, in our secular worldview, with the tremendous advances in science, especially the position of women, and many other wonderful gifts that the modern secular civilization has given, without denying any of them, supporting all of them, promoting all of them, and yet spiritualizing in, an underlying foundation of spirituality. Sri Ramakrishna gave this beautiful example. He said, a man climbs the stairs in a house. He leaves behind the ground floor and the staircase and goes to the roof, and he finds that the roof is made of mortar and brick dust and cement or whatever it is, and stone. And then he looks back and sees whatever he has left behind. The ground floor, the first floor, and the staircase, they're all made of the same thing. In the same way, when you turn away from the world, in your search for God, when you do find God, and then you look back upon the world again, you find what we had left behind, what we had discarded in our search for God, is made of the same divine substance which God is made of. So, Sri Ramakrishna called it the Vijnana. After spiritual realization, we call it a super realization, let us say. To see, as Sri Ramakrishna said, see God with open eyes. Says, when I close my eyes, there is God, and when I open my eyes, there is no God. What kind of God is that? This is what Nivedita says. The spiritualization of, to see the spiritual reality which appears to us as the secular reality. Not to impose. So when the moment you say spiritualization of secular life, immediately alarm bells go off everywhere. Are you calling for a theocratic state all over again? Well, that has been tried, usually with disastrous results. So to see spirituality, and it's a capacious spirituality. One approach is, Sister Nivedita says, what a beautiful way to look at religion. That all religions are true, not in the sense in which they claim they were true. That we alone have possession of the truth and others do not. Rather, in a much deeper, profounder, and much more beautiful sense in which they are all carrying the truth, they are reflecting the truth. Professor John Hicks says, the religions of the world are like planets circling a central sun. They are all shining light, but the light they shine in, they reflect, they give light to us. That light does not belong to the religion, it does not belong to the planets. It belongs to the central sun, which is God, or which is the divine reality. This is what Nivedita is talking about. She says, when Vivekananda stood up to speak at the World Parliament of Religions in 1893 in Chicago, in front of him was the modern West, with full of energy and ambition, power, scientific inquiry, a new outlook on life. Behind him was India, with its 5,000 years of patient development of spirituality. So when he stood up to speak, at that moment, in him, the East and the West met. These are prophetic words, because that's exactly what happened. If you see the history of the last 100 years, that's what's been happening. Phil Goldberg, his beautiful book, American Vedanta, he traces the influence of Hinduism on America. And he starts with the transcendentalists, then he goes on to Vivekananda and shows how from Vivekananda till today, this whole of Eastern wisdom has come to take root in the West also. So the East and the West met in Vivekananda. But then she also goes on to say, the past and the future met. Vivekananda represents the best of what is there in India's past. But this is what not as both jnana and bhakti, jnana means spiritual knowledge, action, work, can we do in the world, not as divorced from our devotion and spiritual knowledge, not as divorced from our devotion and spiritual knowledge, but as the expression of that devotion and spiritual knowledge. Our exact words are, Vivekananda is the prophet of karma, not as divorced from jnana and bhakti, but as expressing it. What a beautiful way of reconciling, because here you have a long, long history of debate about the exact role of action, work in spiritual life. There's a long polemic of Adi Shankaracharya, which goes to show that action and spiritual knowledge are contradictory. They cannot be combined. There are deep philosophical reasons for that. And Vivekananda reconciles it in this new higher synthesis, so to say. She speaks about how Vivekananda's spirituality is a spirituality which makes the service of humanity the worship of God. Here Vivekananda is expressing his guru's teachings. Shiva Jnana Jiva Seva. Shiva, God, Jnana, knowledge, Jiva, sentient being. Seva means service. Service to sentient beings is the worship of, in knowing them to be Shiva. It's a play on words. Jiva, sentient beings, us, individuals. Shiva, God. Knowing the Jiva to be Shiva, serve. So, what you do in the temple and what you do in the classroom, in the hospital, and in how you behave with your clients, at your boss, and in the community, with your family at home, they are all places where she does so eloquently. She says, the classroom, the shopkeeper's shop, the farmyard, these are as fit places for meeting of man and God as the cell of a monk or a temple. So, transforming action into spirituality. Not splitting into secular, spiritual, but just as the rituals performed here in the church, in the temple, are holy, sacred, can we do that for the rituals which we perform in the office, in the school, in the hospital, at home? So the worship of God and the service of humanity becoming one. Now we understand. Swami Vivekananda, when he started our monastic order, he gave us this motto. In Sanskrit, Atmano Mokshartham Jagathidayacha, meaning for the liberation of the self and for the welfare of the world. Liberation of the self and the welfare of the world. And among us monks and some scholars, we debate what is this and? Self-liberation and welfare of the world. You know, the and. Why this and? How are they different? How are they connected? What's the relationship between your own liberation and the welfare of the world? And it just struck me. This and is a very ancient and. We go back to the Gospels. When Jesus was asked, what is the most important commandment? Hollywood generation, 10 commandments, but the rabbi assured me there are more than 500 commandments actually. So it's an important question. What is the most important commandment? And Jesus said, love the Lord thy God with all thy heart and all thy mind. Beautiful. And you can imagine the apostles shutting the notebook down. And then he says, and love thy neighbor. See the same and, which connects the spiritual and what seems to be the mundane, the worldly, your neighbor, and God. You go further back, in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says to Arjuna, sort of the essence of the Gita, Ma manusmara yuddha cha. Remember me, keep your mind on me, and fight the battle of life. Now, notice two things. Keep your mind on God, and fight the battle of life, and, the same man. And the and on both sides, the sacred and the secular, the divine and the mundane. It's an ancient teaching really, but we are just again rediscovering it for our times in our way. So that's another point that Nivedita. We've almost run out of time, but I just mentioned one more from the Nivedita. Told us that art, science, and religion are three ways of expressing a single truth. But you need Advaita, non-duality, to understand this. So art, science, and religion are three ways of expressing a single truth. Now what this means, I'm sure you could write volumes on this. In what sense is art spiritual? It is spiritual in one sense. When you see a church like this, with church music, with paintings, yes, for a long time in our history, whether it's in Europe or in India, art has been connected to religion. Art served religion. Art expressed religious motives. That's one thing. But suppose art which is not directly about something religious. How is it spiritual? We know it is, but how? And science, it seems to be quite distinct, even contrary to religion. And Vivekananda says it is another way of expressing that same truth. I know Professor Sen also knows there's a monk in our order who's a cutting-edge pure mathematician, one of India's leading pure mathematicians. Now, what's the relationship between being a monk and a mathematician? So, for him, if you ask him, I've asked him. He says, it's not different. For me, what I do is mathematics, and what I do in meditation, they're the same thing. But for this, you have to have a very capacious idea of spirituality. To see that through art, and through science, and through spirituality, religion, you are expressing one divine reality. That essay which introduces Swami Vivekananda's complete works, I think is the best hermeneutical exercise on Vivekananda ever done till today. You could do a PhD on that introduction itself. And she ends that by this sentence. She says that she's writing this 4 years after Vivekananda passed. She says, even now, it seems that the teachings that he has left behind are so vast that we are barely able to begin to comprehend what he said. And I feel, which I'm sure Nivedita, she intuited, that as the centuries roll by, Vivekananda's reimagining of Hinduism, of Vedanta, and indeed spirituality will, stand taller and taller as the centuries roll by, and they will inform and enrich world spirituality. Thank you very much. Thank you for giving me this